The egg is extremely valuable. It's why women are born with all the eggs that they're ever going to have. Women are biologically more valuable than men. Like a man could have thousands of babies, but women can only have a few dozens. And then you can build from there a lot of things that happen in society.
How do we see that in humans?
The obvious one is that
Tomás Pueyo is a writer and thinker known for making complex ideas easy to understand. And in this one, we dive headfirst into his article series, The Game Theory of Sex.
in a dating app world, lower value, let's say, men from an evolutionary psychology perspective are going to have a much harder time meeting women online.
Do you think that a bigger market would mean that it would be easier for you to find someone who fits your niche?
The very big winners of this are the men who are highly attractive, and then the women who only want a lot of sex.
Yeah.
But the others are losing. There's another value in slut shaming, which is supply and demand of sex. The less sex there is, the more valuable it becomes, and the more men are willing to commit in order to have it.
This is kind of like the prisoner's dilemma of sex between females. And then men will become more faithful.
Like, do you know what the single most unfulfilled female fantasy is in sex?
No. Thomas, great to see you and great to finally be able to sit down.
Thanks for having me. I saw your videos and they sound they're really cool.
Yeah, I've read your stuff and I've followed your Substack, Uncharted Territories, for a while, and I think ever since the first time I read it, I was like, one time, at some point in time, I have to sit down and talk to this guy, because you have this ability to, you attack interesting topics from first principle, and you find some of the most interesting ideas and topics that you decide to dissect. And maybe we can start there. Like, how did you start writing, and how did this whole Uncharted Territories Substack start?
Yeah, I was super lucky. I used to work in tech, and suddenly in 2020, early 2020, I started looking into this new thing which was happening in China. And I wrote a couple of articles on COVID super early on, and they became massively viral. And I gathered an audience from that, and here I am now. This is my full-time job.
Nice. But you used to live, because I think I remember this from the early newsletters and stuff that I read, that you lived in Silicon Valley. You worked in big tech there.
That's right. I spent like 15 years in Silicon Valley. And then during COVID, it was a massive hassle. So I started moving to Europe.
Yeah. And now you live in Spain.
And now I live in Spain.
Are you Spanish or are you French? It's hard to...
I'm both, and I'm also American. I spent enough time in America that they decided to adopt me.
Yes. And because your writing is very, like, it looks like if I didn't talk to you now, I would have thought that this is like a pure English speaker, native English speaker that has written in English his whole life.
I am so Americanized. All my European friends say, "Oh, you're so American. You're so capitalist." So yes. I'm not full American. I think I still have my European side to balance, but I am very Americanized.
Yeah, that's good. But I wanted to have you on because, like, you have written so many interesting articles, and we don't have time to go through like a tiny fraction of them. But there was one article that I remember a while back. You because you often write articles and you write some series, so you follow topics for a while and you dissect them. And you did have this series that was called The Game Theory of Sex. And you wrote a couple of interesting articles. Then all of a sudden, you had the third article, I think, or something, was kind of in defense of the game theory of sex. And it seemed to me that maybe you got a bit of a backlash from that article series. And this is a topic that I think this very topic is the topic that won Trump the election in the US elections. Maybe. I think it helped at least. So this is a very, I don't know what to call it, like contagious topic. Why did you decide to write this series, The Game Theory of Sex?
Yeah, I like touching all the most important topics for our future, especially the ones that are undertouched. So I don't touch too much politics. It's very intensely covered. And also I think it matters much less than people think. And so I try to focus on the topics that really matter. but people don't talk about. And I don't think people talk enough about how the psychology of sex drives so much of what we do. So I agree with you that I think the debate around wokeism touched and influenced a lot of the election with Trump. And that's an example, right? I think the topic with regards to trans rights, for example, or the equality of men and women, these are not intelligently discussed. And I think you need to go deep into evolutionary psychology to really understand what's going on. And from there, build up what the different relationships should be between sexes and why they are the way they are.
But why do you think it is that people have such a problem with that? Like to intelligently discuss from first principles the differences between women and men and the relationship between us?
Yeah. I think there's probably a couple of reasons. I think the main one is that we come from a background a century ago where women were objects, they were possessions, right? And so we are extremely sensitive to that not happening again. And so every time we see some time of inequality there, we've been bashing against it. And we saw in the Me Too movement that we hadn't done that enough. And so we did more of it. But the more we do that, the more we equalize. And the rule of thumb of inequality of outcomes means inequality of rights is less true. Right? In the past, it was nearly always true. So we assumed, okay, if there's an inequality of outcomes, there must be an inequality of rights.
Yeah.
But now we're at a point where that's not the case anymore. And so we need to be much more thoughtful on, okay, what is it exactly that's going on in each one of the instances to figure out whether this is the right thing for society or not.
Yeah, I get that. And I do agree with you. And I think it's important to be willing to discuss almost everything. We have to be willing to discuss it because if we don't, then that is the recipe for disaster. But
and there's still a few topics that are very hard to discuss that I want to touch, but I haven't touched, but they're just too toxic. Hopefully the window is going to be open.
Which ones?
I cannot even say it because it's just like just mentioning it's too toxic. It's too toxic.
Okay, I see. Okay, but you in the series, at least in the beginning, you kind of start by like everything comes back to having uterus versus not having uterus.
Yeah, and it goes like slightly like beyond this. It's having eggs versus not, right? So the key is that the egg is extremely costly, extremely valuable. There's one reason, for example, why women are born. In fact, they're conceived with all the eggs that they're ever going to have. It's a very expensive thing. It's a very precious thing, and usually, in nearly all animals, the individual that has the egg is also the one that carries the baby. And so what that means is that it's extremely expensive biologically to be female. Because A, you need to carry the eggs, and then 2, you need to carry the baby. And since you're having the baby, the default psychologically, we've evolved so that the woman is the default person to take care of the baby, because many times the man was not even available. Yeah. And so what we end up is with a world where the most valuable resource is the ability to have babies, because it takes around 2 years, at least 2 years, if not up to 18, to have sex and have babies, right? Yeah. And so what it means is that women are biologically just more valuable than men because they have the limiting factor for reproduction. Like a man could have like hundreds of or thousands of babies, really, but women can only have a few dozens at the very most. Yeah. And so they're the limiting factor. And so they are more valuable than men. And then you can build from there a lot of things that happen in society. You have this interesting, you talk about Genghis Khan as a kind of an example of men. And what's the Russian lady? It's a Russian woman. Yeah, I don't remember the name, but yeah, like she, like the one who had the most children, right? And she had something like 50 or something
69, like this? 69, I think. Whereas, it was, or something like that.
There
babies
you go.
Throughout her lifetime. Yeah.
Right? And so that tells you, okay, the very, very maximum children you can have is say 60, 70 as a woman. The very, very maximum that you can have as a man is literally thousands.
Yeah.
Right? You can have sex once or twice a day, maybe, if you have a lot of testosterone for like 60 years, something like this, 360 years times 365. That's a lot of babies you can have. And so men are really not, like, sperm is not a limiting factor. What's really limiting as a factor for reproduction is women's ability to have children, and that makes them more valuable biologically.
And you build on this. How does that come to fruition? How do we see that like in humans?
Yeah. So the obvious one is that because they're more valuable, they are the ones who choose who to have sex with and pair with.
Yeah.
And as a result, men need to compete for that. They need to win the competition. And that means a bunch of things. It means that one way of competing is just with brute force, right? So you just beat the other man or the other man. And so that's one of the reasons why men are way, way stronger than women. Like the average man is stronger than 99% of the women. Mm-hmm. That's why men are much stronger on the upper body, because most of the fight is upper body. Yeah. So it's arms, it's pecs, it's back.
Relatively you're stronger in the upper body compared to the legs. Yeah, that's probably, that's true.
And to women, right? I think, I don't remember the ratios, but it's something like you are like, I don't know, 50% stronger in legs, but like 100 or 200% stronger in arms, things like this, right? And then not only this, but for example, you have your jaw that is stronger, the brow, the nose, or they are bigger because you need to be able to withstand hits. Yeah. One of the reasons why you have the beard is to appear also stronger on the jaw.
Yeah, you mentioned this. This is interesting that
right?
you kind of have this in your article. People should watch it because you can see the pictures there. And you have a lot of, it's a bad way of saying it probably, but like feminine looking men. And they have like very soft jaws. And then you have like
that's right.
persons that we, like society generally think of as attractive men. They have very strong jawlines. And you also then mentioned that
That's
people
right.
like me, like I use a beard, I have a beard. And the reason why I'm sporting a beard is probably because I believe that I look more attractive having a beard. But why do I feel like I look more attractive? And I'm guessing, yeah.
And that's the reason, exactly. Your jaw seems bigger. And there's also another reason, which is also linked to the hair. Like hair is not extremely useful from an evolutionary perspective. It does keep your head warm. It does protect from the sun. But it's something we can live without, and especially we can live without a ton of hair. And so what happened is that we've evolved to produce a lot of hair when we're young, and when you're older, you don't produce it as much because it's not as needed. Yeah. And we then take that as a sign of youth, and youth is valuable for fertility, which is why men, when they have hair, are seen as more valuable partners because they are seen as more fertile.
How does this work with women though? Because they don't have the beard and the.
Well, so this is called a sexual ornament, right? So the beard works for the jaw, for enlarging the jaw. But what happens is that all the signs that make somebody more masculine are going to be seen in a woman as less valuable because she seems more masculine.
Yeah. Because a definition of a feminine person is like the inverse of a masculine person. So the
that's
less.
Right. Yeah. And so, for example, everything that is a big nose, a big brow, they're going to be seen as too masculine because they are built for fight. Yeah. Whereas the hair is a sexual ornament, which is why young women like having long hair, and in fact, they try to pull that off for as long as they can. Because it shows youth and therefore fertility. Whereas, for example, older women, which might not be able to pull off these longer hair, in fact, they're going to be combing it or going to the hairdresser so that it looks more voluminous, so that they look like they have more hair than they actually have.
Yeah. And also you mentioned there, I think in one of the articles about the skin, having like clear and fresh skin and stuff like we know like that are like we consider attractive, but the reason why we find it attractive is like evolutionary and biological in that smooth skin is is kind of a proxy for youth.
That's right. It's a proxy for youth, and it's a proxy for a couple more things, right? It's a proxy for a better immune system. So your genes are better because they can fend off diseases that might end up making your face less symmetrical, which is why also we like symmetry. It also means that you had a more like an upbringing that was more that had more resources. And so the symmetry of the face in general and the quality of the skin all suggest higher quality of resources and of genetics.
Okay, so this is interesting. So because I've heard this before about the symmetry of the face, that's like the easiest way to decide whether someone is attractive or not is just to see how symmetrical their faces are. And you're saying that, or your claim is that it's because if you have a symmetrical face, it proves that you have a healthy immune system. Is that
a healthy immune system? You had a healthy youth where you didn't have a big like a lot of diseases, where you had a bunch of like enough resources. You were fed enough. So this is one of the major factors of symmetry. It's also like
I didn't know.
More generally, we find attractive just averageness in the face. The most beautiful faces are the ones that are the most average. You take the average of 1,000 faces, and that composite is going to be actually more attractive than most of these individual faces. And the current hypothesis is that it's because of this. Now, the more average you are, the less weird your genes are going to be. You're not going to be an outlier in terms of genes, and you didn't have diseases through your upbringing that would cause a deviation from symmetry.
I see. I'm jumping all over the place with these articles, but I also remember something about. You said something. You said something about that attractive parents, they tend to get attractive daughters, but they don't necessarily get attractive boys. Why is that?
Yeah, and that paper I think is relatively recent, so I think it's the kind of thing to take with a grain of salt. But my current understanding of this is that beauty actually matters more for the woman than for the man. Like for the man, the number one driver is actually more dominance. That's what makes it more attractive. And so things like force or intelligence might be a better investment for the children than into the woman. Because for the woman, the number one thing that they bring to the table from a biological standpoint, again, is the ability to have children. Because men cannot do that, they need to provide something else. So they need to provide dominance against other men. They need to provide things like resources, and so all of the reasons, all the indicators of this kind of thing, women are going to be much more sensitive towards. And so this has interesting ramifications. Like for example, we always say that I don't know if you've seen these distributions of beauty, right? There's men rated women, and then women rated men, and then the women when they rated the woman. In terms of like 0 to 10, they had a normal distribution, right? So it's like something like this, and then this is 5, right? And then there's fewer and fewer of the 8s, and so on and so forth. And that's what you would expect. Yeah. Whereas the women were not the normal distribution like this. It was a distribution much more like this, where a lot more men were actually considered unattractive, less than average. And there were very few that were found attractive. And so why is this? Yeah. And so the current hypothesis on this is that women are easy to assess from a man's standpoint in terms of attractiveness, because beauty, which is a proxy for fertility, is easy to see visually. But for men, beauty is not the number one factor for quality of reproduction. Things like dominance and resources are much more valuable. And so because you cannot see that easily in the face, the default is a man is not going to be attractive. And he can only be attractive once you figure out the cues that are going to tell you as a woman, hey, yes, this guy is more attractive. So that's why women are going to be much more sensitive to cues like intelligence or creativity or force or dominance, social status. than men.
Yeah, and this is also interesting. One of the most interesting pieces you wrote were the one where you mentioned that women, they have to kind of sort men through 2 dimensions, while men, they only have like 1 dimension. We can only because and you can probably talk about this more than I can, but the fact was that men, we can allow ourselves to be very short term in our thinking. Like, is this person beautiful or not? Yes or no, let's go, or let's don't. But women is not so easy because they don't have the same timeline that we men have. So they cannot afford the luxury to be so short term in their thinking. They have to also have the second dimension, which is more of a long term thinking, right? Is this person like a good provider? Like, will this person be able to keep me safe? And talk about this. That was like super interesting.
Yeah, it's called the dual mating strategy, and to me, it's still not something that's fully resolved. We have data pointing towards this, but it's not fully resolved. The idea there is, if you're a man, you don't lose much by having sex. So as a default, you're going to try to have as much sex as possible. You are not going to commit easily, though, because that's expensive. When you commit to a woman and her offspring, you are going to be spending many years supporting that woman, that family, and so commitment is much more expensive to men, but sex is not. So as a rule of thumb, men will want to have sex with a big share of the women that are presented to him. For women, that's not the case because sex has an extreme cost. So they're going to be much more selective for sex because they can have a baby, and so that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is what they might want as a sexual partner might not be the same thing as they want for a long committed partner, right? For a long committed partner, they want this person to be faithful and committed and hardworking and caring and kind. For a sexual partner, they actually want a person that is going to be have babies that then have many babies. And so these usually are the more dominant men, right? And so you end up with an optimal where what's optimal for you in the long term, which is this commitment, might not be the optimal for you for the short term, which is the dominance. And so you end up with this dual mating strategy where you might want to have one man for one thing and one man for another thing. You want one for the commitment and then the other one for the sex. And so ideally, both of these men are in the same person, right? A man that's very dominant, that's very masculine, that's maybe aggressive, high social status, and also committed to you and caring and loving. But if you cannot have them, you might be sexually attracted as a woman to a man that is strong and dominant and aggressive, which you might want to have sex with. And in fact, if that man has a lot of sex with a lot of women, that's a plus, it's not a minus, because you know that if you have this baby from this guy, that baby is going to go on, and like if it's a man, and have sex with a lot of women, have a lot of children. So it's actually positive for that, but it's a negative for the commitment, because then for the commitment, if he fucks around, then he might have babies with a lot of other women, and that's not going to be optimal. So that's the dual mating strategy.
How do we see this in practice though? Are women less faithful than men when it comes to marriage?
So, so a couple of things. First, it does not look like there's massive amounts of children out of wedlock. Right? I think the latest that I had read is around 2%. So it's not like actually women are having a lot of babies outside of marriage. I'm not sure how that was a few centuries ago or a few thousands of years ago. My guess is it was more than it is today. So that's one of the things. But we also see that men cheat a bit more than women. Okay. I don't remember the numbers, but it's something 20, 30%. And men and women maybe 10, 20% have ever cheated. But they do cheat. They do cheat. And so that's one of the ways we see it. But we see it in many other ways. Like, for example, the normal speech that women have about the ideal man is the caring one, Like I want a man who loves me and all these things, right? But then you look at revealed preferences, which like what kind of men they want to have sex with, or even better, you can just look at all the erotic literature that women read,
Yes.
which is the number one. This is the number one type of book in terms of sales. It's erotic literature for women, and you see way more big, strong, dominant men as what like women would be interested in. You also see it in the most unfulfilled sexual fantasies, right? So Ella has some great research on this. And do you know what the single most unfulfilled female fantasy is in sex?
No.
It's dominance. It's being dominated. So it looks like I think around 50% of women are interested in some kind of dominance. It can be light. It doesn't need to be aggressive. Like it doesn't need to be rape play. Just standard dominance. But very few men are willing to give it, and that I don't know if it's just a result of culture or something else. But men, as a default, don't want to dominate women. I think out of respect culturally, maybe.
Yeah.
But women want to be dominated, and that makes sense. A man that is going to be dominating them is going to be, as a default, more dominant, and he's going to, if he has children or like sons, they're going to be more dominant and have more relationships and then for more children.
Yeah, you because you also talk about this, that there are a lot of like submission cues that women have. Like men tend to find that attractive. Which, like you mentioned something about like holding your head down, stuff like that.
Yeah, right. So if you're like this versus like this, right, and looking up versus down, you're gonna be slightly more attractive if you as a woman, if you look a couple notches down, right, and vice versa for men. And goes back to the idea of these differences between what's attractive in men and women. As a rule of thumb, a man that's more dominant is going to be more attractive to women, and that makes them more masculine. And so, as a default, women is going to be more feminine, looking like the opposite, so a bit more submissive.
But isn't this like, I feel like we have the same with men in the sense that you mentioned that the difference between the real preferences and the claimed preferences. And I think it is to some extent the same with men. I would think is that we say that we want someone who's faithful and like caring for our children and who's like nice to talk to and nice to spend time with. But I think if you look at people's porn searches, I don't think it is like a faithful, caring, good conversation partner. Like, isn't this like why is it different for men than for women?
Oh, that's so interesting. So as a man, evolutionarily, you do want to have a partner that is going to be sexually faithful, because you don't know whether you're father or not. And so if you see that the female is chaste, you are going to feel more comfortable, which is why, like knowing that their children are yours, which is why women go to very long length to show this chastity. It's one of the reasons why, for example, in seduction, a lot of women, the default is going to be no.
Yeah.
Because if they say yes too fast, like you realize they're gonna have sex with a lot of men, and so they're not chaste. So you might have sex with this person, but then you might not be willing to commit to a long-term relationship. And that goes back to all the conversation around the body count, right?
Yeah.
The problem with the body count is that it signals that the person is not chaste, right? The problem with that as a proxy is that obviously you can change and you can make a decision and decide not to be chaste, but it's signaling, okay, this person enjoys sex with a lot of partners, therefore it reduces the probability that this person is chaste.
Yeah, because this is something I've thought of like myself, is that when I was in college, I remember that some men, they could kind of get off the hook with like they were sleeping with a lot of women, and it seemed like the more women they slept with, the more they got, like the more the women were interested in having sex with them. And you talked about this earlier in this conversation, but it was the opposite, the complete opposite when it comes to the women, that the women who were sleeping with a lot of men, they were seen as loose. And you mentioned this one in your articles that women are the harshest against each other. Like they use this as a tool for competition.
Slut shaming. I have a full article coming on slut shaming, so that's going to be interesting. I'll touch on this. But that makes sense. I think this is a good example where our evolutionary psychology is against what is right? And so we need to understand both in order to do what's right as a society. From a evolutionary psychology perspective, having a lot of sexual partners is not the same for men and women. Because the man who has lots of sexual partners does not carry the consequences unless he wants to. And so what this is showing is that the person is very socially successful. As a female, a guy that is very successful with other women is a strong signal. It means that he's socially dominant. It means that if you have a son from this man, he's going to go on and have sex with a lot of women and hence a lot of children. So it's just strictly positive from that regard. It's not positive for the commitment side, but it's positive for that regard. A woman that has a lot of sexual partners is not going to reproduce more. It's going to reproduce nearly the same as if she only has one. But with this person, the father actually does not know whether the child is theirs, and so that increases the question on paternity. And so that's one tool that people use to actually attack women, because this chastity is so valuable that you have slut shaming. But slut shaming, it looks like, is more pervasive between women than from men to women. What you see is especially true between sexual competitors, right? So
I think everybody can relate to this.
True, right? Yes, and especially true when in the most important moment in life for reproduction, which is early on in the sexual life, when women are the most fertile, which is just after puberty. So 15 to 18 or so, women are extremely fertile. That's when most slut shaming happens, and it's going to be always with competitors. So people, so usually the target is going to be actually an attractive girl that is from another social group from the attacking girl.
This is, as you speak, I can kind of think back to my own, like when I was in high school. Exactly. And I remember that the girls, they were so mean to each other. And I think like everybody can, and they used stuff like this and probably other similar tactics. But it was probably the same reason, maybe like evolutionary, biologically. But I'm also thinking that.
That's right.
Sorry.
No, yeah. So along those lines, it's interesting because there's another value in slut shaming, which is supply and demand of sex. Right. So because of what we discussed, men are more interested in sex. So there's much more demand from the men's side, and then let's say the supply from women is going to be more like reduced. And so as a result, women as a whole have an incentive in reducing the supply of sex, because the less sex there is, the more scarce it is, the more valuable it becomes, and the more men are willing to commit in order to have it. So actually, a lot of the reduction in sex comes from women. So that's why there's a lot of slut shaming, but also a lot of the other mechanisms, because it's not only between young girls, right? You also see, for example, a lot of older women chastising young girls for being sexually too promiscuous, and that's one of the reasons. If they are providing a lot of sex, then men are going to be much less likely to commit.
Yeah, and this is kind of like the prisoner's dilemma of sex between females. That their cooperation solution, like that, should be to just not have sex. Because then everybody will be better off, because men are pigs, and then men will become more faithful.
Right. So here's a crazy, one of the craziest papers that I read is about how they found differences in culture that came in US campuses based on the ratio of men to women.
Okay.
So what they noticed is, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but what they saw is when on campus there's many more men than women. So, for example, a STEM campus or something like this, usually you have more men than women. Relationships tended to be much more stable.
Yeah.
But of course, like men don't have access to sex, and so they're willing to commit more, and so they do, and so like relationships are more stable. And what will happen when the ratio of women to men was much, much higher, then men could have a lot of access to sex, so there was much more casual sex. A couple of other things that happened is that only the most attractive women had sex, and they had more than others, and the least attractive women here had less sex. And so what happened apparently is that feminist movements were much stronger in these campuses. And I believe, I don't remember if this was proven or it was a hypothesis from the authors of the paper, is that this was caused, among other things, because they didn't have access to partners. And then the women who were having a lot of sexual partners felt solidarity towards the ones who didn't, and so they joined the group, and therefore there was much more feminism in these groups in these campuses than in the other ones.
That's interesting, and of course that is often the social sciences where we see all the feminists pop up. And is that maybe is due to this? Maybe, and so this is one of factors. Again, it's just one paper, but I think the takeaway of all of these papers is not as much each one of these things that I'm telling right now, all of them are true, but rather we get a lot of indications that we are different as men and women, that this drives psychology, it drives society, it drives a lot of mechanisms on how we work. And so we should not assume that we are equal in terms of what we want. We might be equal in terms of the rights that we have. We should be equal in terms of the rights that we have, right? But we should understand that we don't want the same things. Yeah. When you stay on the feminist thing, because you mentioned there that when women have too little access to sex, they become feminists.
Yeah.
But we have a different culture in men, the incel culture, where with like a very few subset of men, the dominant, strong ones, they get all the sex and they take all the girls, and then like kind of like quite a big chunk of men, they never experience sex. And is that, number one, is that something new? Like, because this is something that has popped up for the last 10 years, like the concept of incels. But it sounds to me like this should be something that should have been prevalent in olden times as well. So start with that.
A couple of things. Yeah, no, this is super interesting, and we're going to talk about the Vikings.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
but before this, so there's one topic that we haven't touched, which I think is important, which is also, it's called assortative mating, right? So there's another factor in everything we've said that is super important, which is men and women do look for partners, especially for the long term, that are similar to theirs. Similar in terms of beauty, in terms of attractiveness, in terms of socioeconomic status, in terms of education, in terms of religion, in terms of politics. So this is very much an equalizer in terms of partnering.
Time you said there, so we are like, we generally tend to look for someone who is equal to us in status, both when it comes to looks and when it comes to like career and whatever,
education,
socioeconomic
politics, religion,
status. Okay, so that is like, do you think that is because we kind of deep down we understand that, like, I'm not a 10, so why should I go for 10 women? I should go for 7s or 6 or 5s or 4s.
You do, and it's so interesting. So there's a video, I'm going to describe it, but if you watch it, it's even better. So they had 10 men and 10 women, and they put numbers from 1 to 10 on the men and 1 to 10 in the women. They put it here so that the people actually didn't know what their own number was. And the goal was to get to partner with a person from the other sex that had as high a number as possible. And so what happens is, if you're a 1, you see a 10, you're going to go immediately to the 10, right? But the 2 and the 3 and the 4 are also going to go there, right? And so if you're a 10, you might not know that you're a 10, but the fact that everybody's coming to you tells you, I am very, very valuable. So because I'm very valuable, and then I'm going to go to the ones that are more valuable, right? And so, for example, imagine that you're a 7, right? You're a 7, the 1, 2, 3, 4 are going to you. You say, okay, no, I'm valuable. So you're going to go to the 10. But the 10 is seeing the 8, like 6, 7, 8 going to them. And so they're like, oh no, I can do better than this, right? So they're not going to pay attention to the 7. And so they're going to try to pay attention to the 10s or the 9s, right? And so what happens is that through this marketplace, even if you don't know your own value objectively, by the reaction of other people, you know what you value. And this has a lot of consequences for day-to-day behaviors. Like, for example, this is the reason why they tell you, don't respond immediately to the messages that you receive, right? Why? Because if you respond immediately, it looks like you're very eager. If it looks like you're very eager, it's like, I can probably do better than this, right? So that's why this traditional advice of don't look too eager is actually true and good advice.
Because you're trying to fake, you're trying to trick the other person into believing that you are a higher number than you actually is.
That's right. And it's important because everybody does it. Like, it's because everybody does it, everybody needs to do it because they need to appear more valuable than they are. So this is an interesting piece. But now coming back to the incels.
Yeah.
So in the Viking era, inequality started emerging. And the reason why it started emerging is because farming started becoming much more productive. And farms, you can accumulate the wealth in a farm. And so in Scandinavia. And so that's what people did. They accumulated the wealth. And once you accumulated the wealth, you want to pass it to the son. And so men who had more wealth actually ended up having access to more women. When that happens, you have a surplus of men. And societies that do that have a problem, because if you have a surplus of young men that don't have access to sex, they're going to kill you. And so the innovation that Vikings brought is, okay, you should go and get women from somewhere else. And that is when in the 700s, 800s, you start having the Viking raids across Northern Europe all the way to Sicily in Italy. And so the raids were a cornerstone of the sexual inequality. Without sexual inequality, you don't have raids. It turns out that you see the exact same pattern in the Muslim world, where you also have sexual inequality because you can marry several different women, which means that young men don't have an outlet for their desire for sex. And so what do? You invent jihad. And so that was the big driver of expansion of them in the Muslim world in the 700s and 800s. I do not think you have jihad without the inequality of sex. In fact, it's very well known, right? Like the fact that men are promised 69 virgins in heaven. Like, it's because, okay, you got, like, the sex that I'm not gonna give it to you because I'm gonna keep all the women, you're gonna have it once you die. Like, it's a direct connection.
So the jihadist terrorists are mostly, we kind of know this, I would guess, they're mostly ugly losers because they are the ones who are not able to achieve sex.
Maybe I'm not sure about that, because then once you create this as a culture,
I understand.
Maybe then you start having more status. So there's weird things happening there. So I wouldn't put my hand on fire.
But the first jihadist terrorist.
Yes,
was
probably, and so I don't know if they were ugly, right? But they what they didn't have for sure is access to wealth and status. Like, that's for sure. Because if you had access to wealth and status, you could probably have at least one, if not more, women.
That's interesting also.
So now going back to...
Sorry. I picture in my mind with these horny Vikings, like raiding Europe because of their lack of sex. I haven't thought about it that way. I thought that we were like imperialist in a strange way, because we obviously weren't imperialist because we didn't conquer. We just looted, basically. And it's a well-known fact that I would say we because I'm Norwegian, I guess, but we had a lot of sex and we raped a lot of women down there. And
Yeah.
and the way you're putting it now, it kind of makes more sense to me that, yeah, of course they had to, because the sex weren't like available for them.
Available. That's right. And so in fact, I think this studies, I'm going to botch the numbers. They're not true, but they're directionally correct. I think it's like in Ireland and Iceland, something like this, where they did analysis of Y chromosomes and mitochondrial DNA. So the Y chromosomes are passed from father to son, and mitochondrial DNA from mother to their children, and hence like daughters. Yeah. And from there, they realized that like virtually all women, not all, but like a vast majority of women, they had been taken from Ireland to other places and had sex with a lot of invaders. So there was much more genetic code from invader males and from local females.
Yeah.
So basically the local males were basically wiped out by the Vikings in high areas of Viking raids.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. You were about to say something else. I'm sorry for...
With the incels. So going back to this, so incels, I think there's probably lots of different factors that are causing incels, and there's at least two that I think we can identify. One of them is that in a dating app world, which is very focused on looks, for reasons we can discuss later, and immediate markers of status, like a person who does not have good looks or great status is going to have a tremendously hard time partnering up. Tremendously hard, much harder than before. Because before, you didn't have this super liquid marketplace.
Yeah.
You met people physically, right? And so supply and demand were very small, right? If you had like 5 men and 5 women, right? Like it's like you will get somebody, but it is a million of each.
Yeah.
It's actually like the top will have a lot of demand, but the bottom not as much.
Yeah.
Right? And so men are going to be like lower value, let's say men from a evolutionary psychology perspective, are going to have a much harder time meeting women online. Then the second factor is they're also having a hard time meeting women offline, because with the Me Too movement, which is fantastic and super important, I think one aspect of it is you should not hit on women, right? And so men do not know how to do this. They don't know how to seduce. They don't know how to approach women. And so that's the second aspect, where neither online nor offline they can meet people. And then before people met physically in the activities that they did. Right? They might meet at school, they might meet in university, they might meet at work, they might meet in church. But many of these activities now are happening online, so it's much harder to meet men and women. And then 2, both in school and especially at work, now it's seen as poor taste to hit on each other. Mm-hmm. And so we can talk about this, but like men are usually the ones who hit on girls, and they as they should. But because now society sees that as negative, like in like they don't have a way to hit on girls, and as a result they end up single. And then the problem is we unlike the Vikings and say the Muslims, we don't have an outlet for these men, and so they might see outlets such as MAGA and things like this, or white supremacy and things like this for their desires, which is toxic for society.
Yeah. So, because it's contrary to what you logically would think, because you would think that access to a bigger market would mean that it will be easier for you to find someone who kind of fits your niche in a sense. But what actually is happening is that a bigger market makes it so that the dominant ones, like the really dominant ones, they don't necessarily live in your neighborhood. They live in the world, and they will just capture all the women in a sense.
So yes, and I think like that's we need to remember that there's a dual mating strategy, right? Where what happens is in a very liquid market, women can have access to all the men they want for sex.
Yeah.
And so like it's the highly attractive men that are going to have all the sex as they want, but they cannot have them. They cannot have access to them for commitment. And so what happens is that then it's not only incels. You also have this problem for women where it's like, I'm meeting all these men, but they don't want to commit. They're ghosting me all the time. And that's the other problem is the mirror problem of the incels, but for women is like, yes, they can have access to sex, but they cannot have access to commitment. Because now as a man, I have all the sex that I want. As a like highly attractive man, I have also access to all the sex that I want. I don't need to commit. And so the very big winners of this are the men who are highly attractive, and then the women who only want or who want a lot of sex.
Yeah.
But the others are losing.
I see. You mentioned earlier that men should hit on women. That's the way it should be. You said that. Why is that?
Yeah. So we discussed the fact that women are more valuable than men.
Yeah.
And women need to signal chastity. Right? And so the men, it's very easy to see the attractiveness of a woman visually, but it's not true for men. And so the man needs to prove that they are valuable enough to have access to the more valuable, biologically more valuable person, which is the woman. And so it makes sense that the man is approaching. If it's the woman, she's for starters going to appear as less chaste. Now, I'm not saying this is how society should be.
No.
I'm saying this is how our instincts play. Now, I think it's amazing that especially in Nordic countries, there's much more equality there. I think it's super healthy. We can understand, okay, this is not a sign of chastity. It's actually much better also for women if they are the ones going for men, because then they can go and access more valuable men rather than only the ones incoming. So it's actually a win-win for everybody to go beyond these instincts. But we should understand that these are the instincts.
Yeah.
And so we should understand that as a default, men will always feel more like they have to do it, and women will not want to, as a default, make the first step, even if it would be ideal if they did.
Why do you think that is, though? Because I think you're right in that the Nordics, and in Norway especially, that it's, to me, it feels a bit foreign when my fiance, she's Indian. And the culture there is very much so that the man provides, the man takes all the initiative when it comes to dating and stuff, and the woman stays in the house. Of course, she's born in Norway, so she's very culturally Norwegian, but like her parents and stuff, they have a different mentality, and that's very foreign to me. But I also have Spanish friends, and they are more cut from the same cloth as the Indians, in my opinion, than the Norwegians. So why is that? Is it because of like the feminist movement kind of came earlier in the Nordics, or does it have anything to do with that at all?
Yeah, I don't know. This one I need to look into this because I'm not sure. My hypothesis is the same as yours. Is this equality that came much earlier? Spain was officially Catholic until I think 78, right? 1978. So I think like culturally, even if there's a lot of atheists in Spain, culturally it is still very much inherited these cultures.
Yeah, because I feel like that also comes with a sense of, I think that Spanish women or Indian women that come to Norway, they will feel like Norwegian men are kind of rude. Like they like.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. That it's a feeling of like a sense of entitlement. In my opinion, it sounds and feels like that. They're like, yeah, but you are supposed to, like, why aren't you, like, because I am the woman, and like we are supposed to be kind of taken care of and get gifts and like get all these this, in my opinion, like superficial signs of love. Where I'm like more, it's like if you want to show someone that you deeply love them, you kind of show them commitment. You don't say the word commitment. That is not, you show commitment. But I feel like people from other cultures, this is just about thinking about just now, I feel like maybe that they need to be told that they're loved more than they have, like, they put more value to the superficial things that are very easy actually to give as a man, like give them flowers or tell them that you love them. That is very easy to do. It's a very un-Norwegian thing to do. But like actually having a baby with someone or like stuff like that, that to me is like the ultimate form of commitment. That is more like, that doesn't mean as much in other cultures. Did you relate to this?
I just a reaction on this is that I think you're speaking to signaling for commitment. Right?
Yes, exactly. Sorry.
What are good signals?
That's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, no, I have an answer for this, but here are a couple of thoughts. For example, if you're buying flowers, you're doing two things. One of them is you're burning cash.
Yeah.
So you're proving that you have cash to burn. So that shows that you have wealth. And the other one is that you show that you're thinking about the person. So the person is using your mental space and your time for you to figure out the flowers and all that. And so all of these things are signaling, okay, this person is thinking about me, is willing to burn some cash with me. Okay, that makes sense. The same is true for a diamond ring, right? When you're engaging, like the purpose of the diamond ring is that it is expensive.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? You have a lot of cash to burn in terms of like to spending this rock, which is worthless, really. And so therefore you love me. What you're saying is, okay, as a Norwegian, I am the way I am going to show commitment is through a signal is very hard to fake.
Yeah.
Which is I'm going to be there when you have a baby with me. Right?
Yeah.
Except that how does she know before having the baby with you?
Yeah, that's true.
She doesn't, right? And so she actually needs proxies for that signaling. And so that's when, like, if she sees that you're spending all this time and attention on you, that's a signal that after she has the baby, you're going to stay and provide all of that.
Yeah. And I get it. I think that, but I still feel like Norwegian women expect less of the signaling that I think women of other cultures do. I think that this is just, and I think also that, so when immigrants come to Norway and they try to kind of hit on Norwegian women, I think they are in for a ride in that, like, those women do not want to feel like objects that are less, because I think that is more normal in other culture, where it's like, I'm the man, I can provide for you. Norwegian women will be like, fuck you, I can provide, I will pay the fucking 50%, maybe I can pay 60% because like I'm not. Which
like you're making me think of another factor that I had forgotten about the Nordic countries, which is it's not just like that the culture was more egalitarian for longer. It's also the fact that the social net has been much stronger for much longer.
Yeah.
And so as a woman, like, you objectively need less money that you make because the government is going to be providing for you. And so that changes the entire dynamic, where before, like, if you're Indian, if you don't have a man providing for you, you are fucked. Right? Yeah. But that's not the case for a Norwegian.
100%.
You can work. If you don't, you're going to have money from the government. And so you actually do not need this money from a man.
And don't you think that in of course, I think that is generally a good thing, because it makes it so that I think I'm quite certain that my fiance, she's with me because she wants to be with me, because she doesn't need me, and she knows she doesn't need me. And that is a good thing, I think. And I think that is something I fear is a problem in a lot of other cultures. You mentioned India. I think that is a giant problem in India. I think the women in India, they are with their men mostly because they have to. They have no choice. I hope they love them and they're super happy, but I fear a lot of them aren't.
Have to. They need a man for sure. So that's interesting. This is where we're touching on another point where what is morally right might not be optimal for the community. So what you say is obviously true. Like, yes, thank God women have more access to resources, and they don't need a man to provide them with that. So this is a great progress for society. However, the societies that are like that also have lower fertility.
Yeah.
And so there's a question mark of, okay, like is this something that we can enjoy? We're the lucky generations that can enjoy this, and then in like 2 or 3 generations we're going to lose 50% of the population, and then the societies that are not like this are the ones that are going to be winning because they have more fertility, right? So there's a question mark there that's very high, and so obviously as a society the challenge there is how can we keep this equality in a way that is sustainable for the long term. But right now we haven't figured out how to.
That is interesting. 100%, because when women get too many rights, they get less babies.
They do.
Yeah, that is such a paradox.
And it's like from one aspect it's great. Like if you don't want to have babies, that's fantastic, and you should be able to. But obviously, like that has a problem for society. So my guess is the way we're going to solve this as a society is that as we have fewer and fewer babies, the biggest sources of low fertility are going to be resolved technologically. So my current hypothesis is women have fewer babies for 2 reasons, a small one and a big one. A small one is just the pregnancy and having the baby and whatnot. It's like, that's a lot of work and it's hard and whatnot. That's the small one. The biggest one is having babies takes a lot of time and money. Yeah. Right? And right now, like before, like 200 years ago, like as a woman, you had no alternative. So you might as well have as many babies as possible. Yeah. Because you enjoy them and you love them and whatnot. But now life is freaking amazing. Mm-hmm. And so instead of like sleeping and going traveling and hanging out with my friends, I have to stay with these 2 little shits that I love, but man, they don't let me sleep and they take all my time and they're exhausting. And so I don't want to have more than 1 or 2 max, maybe not even 1, because they take so much time, right? How many women have you talked with that say, no, I don't want to have babies? All the friends that I see that have babies, like they're miserable, right? So the value of life for a woman is so much better today than it used to be 200 years ago, that the cost of opportunity of having babies is too high. So how do you solve this? One of them, like we talked about the pregnancy aspect, which I think is going to be solved through in vitro uteruses, in vitro wombs. And then the second one, I think, is going to be solved with AI and robotics, where all of this is childcare, and you can automate. It's like today you cannot automate childcare, but I think we're getting there. Like within 5 to 10 years, we will be able to automate childcare. So once we do this, I think fertility is gonna go back up.
Yeah, inshallah. I hope they do, because I have one baby now, and it's a mess. And if we want to have more,
how old?
I'm not sure if I'm up for it. I have a different proposal for a solution, though. It's I believe that everything can be traced back to incentives, and I think that it's just a matter of time. I think that already there's some governments who are offering money. Like every woman who gets a baby, they get like a significant amount of money over time. Like they have to also be incentivized to take care of the baby. I think so. That has to be structured correctly.
But it's you're right. It is very expensive, though. It's extremely expensive. It costs like 2 or 3 times GDP per capita to have a baby. So like, for example, in the United States, if GDP per capita is like $70,000, it costs you something like $210,000 like per baby, which is a lot. So I think, but I understand what you're saying, and there's the solutions towards this. I think the one that goes in the direction that is probably optimal is before, one of the reasons why you had babies is to take care of you when you retire. Yeah. And now it's the government that does this, and so you don't need to have babies. So we untied this connection, but we can tie it back. So for example, if your retirement is a percentage of the income of your children, then you're going to make a lot of children, and you're going to make sure they make a lot of money.
I like that one. That one was much smarter than mine. I went to like the Norwegian way, like direct subsidies. The lazy Norwegian way. Of course, we have enough money, oil money. This is, of course, much more sustainable. Thomas, this has been a blast. I want to have you back on. This was super interesting, and we could have. We probably haven't touched half of it. People should definitely go read more of your stuff. Where can people find you if they want to learn more and read more of your stuff?
I write twice a week on uncharted territories. So unchartedterritories.tomaspueyo.com, or just have my name, tomaspueyo.com. It's going to go there. Yeah. And I talk about this. I talk about fertility. I talk about children. I talk about sex. I talk about geo geography and history, and now you can see why, right? We touched here, we focused on game theory of sex, but we also talked on geography and history, like the Vikings and the Muslims, and then we touched on fertility. And the reason why I'm touching all these topics and AI and things like this is because I think they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
And so you need to cover them all in order to understand the overlaps and solve the big problems of humanity.
Yeah, and I hope that society becomes even more open-minded, so you can touch on the stuff that you didn't want to even mention on this podcast now. I hope that you're able to do that, because I find it really fascinating.
Yeah, and conversations like this one is what make this happen. So hopefully people watch it.
I love it. Okay, thank you for your time, and see you soon in the future.